This episode is sponsored by a company who has truly found a solution to an age-old problem, and that is Carna bunker gear. One of the most prevalent conversations in the fire service is should we or should we not train in our bunker gear? Now, the answer to both is yes. As most of us are aware, the carcinogens from structure fires, of which there are over 260 that are dangerous to human health, not to mention the PFAS and other chemicals that are within our gear from the manufacturing process, are factors that we obviously want to minimize. Now, the other side of the coin is that we do need to train in our gear. There is no way to acclimatize the heat retention and lack of mobility than to actually wear the gear. So seeing this problem himself, firefighter and exercise physiologist Ryan Conley developed a carcinogen-free gear at a much lower cost that can be used in non-IDLH atmosphere and training that does not require puncture or tear resistance. Now, as someone who always trained in gear myself throughout my career, I wish this technology was around then. And I got to test it personally while coaching my tactical athlete class a few weeks ago, and can testify that it not only simulates the heat retention of frontline gear, but also the lack of mobility, which is imperative at operating at a high level on the fireground. Now, some additional benefits include being able to doff the gear when you do get banged out for a call, increasing the lifespan of your frontline bunker gear, and then also public education. Think of the number of times that we allow, for example, school children to wear our gear when it's infused with all these carcinogens. So there are so many real-world applications for a fraction of the cost of IDLH-rated bunker gear. So if you want to hear the whole story behind this, listen to my conversation with Ryan Conley on episode 1175 of the Behind the Shield podcast, or go to carnabunkergear.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show 13-year veteran of the fire service, peer support member, and former collegiate athlete, Datwain DJ Shipp. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from the TBIs incurred in college football, his journey into the fire service, peer support, CBD and Cannabis, near-death experiences, psychedelics, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of almost 1,200 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you DJ Shipp. Enjoy. Well, DJ, I want to start by saying thank you so much for initially reaching out a few years ago. We had a great conversation about CBD. We had a kind of God moment as far as this reintroduction, and here we are. So I want to thank you for coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Oh, it's an honor. I'm glad that we got back in touch. Like I said, that's a funny story of us getting back in touch with you mixing up me and DJ Shipley, because when you messaged me, I was like, all right, it's been a while since we last talked. Maybe something else came up. And you said Ryan Parrott and Marcus Capone. And I was like, I know who Marcus is. I don't know who Ryan is. So I looked him up, and he said he was a Navy SEAL. And I was like, okay, Marcus Capone's a Navy SEAL. And then I was like, DJ Shipley is a Navy SEAL. DJ Shipp is a fire captain. Like, I was like, they are 10 years older than me. So I was battling puberty when they were battling overseas.
The Taliban.
So, yeah, there was a lot going on between the differences, but it was very, like you said, there's no coincidences in life. So there's a reason why that happened.
Yeah, no, 100%. This happens. Those people I've been thinking about getting on the show for years and years and years, and all of a sudden everything aligns and it's like, all right, this is the right time to do it. So obviously that was the case with us. Well, very first question, where on planet Earth are we finding you this afternoon?
So I am in China Grove, North Carolina. That's my hometown. That's where I was born and raised. And I was born here, and then I ended up moving to Spencer, North Carolina, for a little bit, and then I came back here when me and my wife met, and because she lived here, so I just moved back to China Grove
So let's
and
start at
whatnot.
that. So from your childhood, tell me what your parents did and then how many siblings you had.
So my dad was a garbage man. He drove a garbage truck, and I was like, all right. So I kind of saw the reasoning why he did that. And my mom, she drove school buses, and then she ended up leaving that and just kind of working with in houses for like remedial adults or mentally handicapped adults. And she did that for a little bit. Then she went back to school, got her degree, and now she's working at the VA doing like payroll and stuff like that. So,
Brilliant.
and I have, you said how many kids do I have?
No, siblings.
Siblings, I have, oh gosh. So I have one, two, three, four, five brothers and two sisters.
You know you have a lot
Um,
when you have to literally stop and think and count.
yeah, I had to sit there and count on my fingers how many I got. But yeah, we have a lot of siblings around us and whatnot. And I have a few cousins that I consider siblings. So then, because we're so close, we've been through so much growing up that it's just one of those things. I consider them my brothers or my sisters and stuff like that.
With your dad first, with the trash collection world that he worked in, what are some of the stories that he's told about that? Because I mean, you hear everything from them finding abandoned infants to doing CPR on people to so many amazing stories through to myself included. The trash guys were my heroes when I was little. I was that little
Oh
kid that used to wait for
yeah.
them. Now sometimes I put booby traps for them too, and they fell over and hurt themselves. But
Well,
so talk to me about that. What did he tell you about the highs and the lows of his profession?
the biggest thing with that, so he started out doing that, but he had his CDL, so he ended up being a truck driver. So he kind of did a little bit of both. But with the trash truck thing, that was the furthest back I can remember of what he did was that. And like he took me on a couple of rides with him back in like in the '90s when I was younger, and I remember riding around with him. I do remember a couple of times going with him and getting the big dumpsters and dumping them off and everything. And I was just kind of like, that's pretty cool. You never think about anything like that. That's pretty cool. But then he ended up going and driving a tractor trailer for a company, and he drove that for a little while, and then he got laid off because he had back surgery, and he got addicted to pills at some point, and the painkillers, and it was one of those things that kind of it devastated me at the time. But then I was just like, okay, it happens. It never knew that it would come back around full circle to where I'm in the fire service, and that's one of the things popping up that's happening a lot is how much addiction is within the fire service, how much addiction we see around us. So he ended up passing away in 2011, and what's funny about that story, like I said, there's no coincidences. When I was in recruit school, we were going through EMT, and we came across congestive heart failure, and I started listening to the ways they were the symptoms of it. And I remember my little brother, he was there when my dad passed away, telling me how he sounded like he was drowning, sounded like
Hmm.
he was trying to breathe, and his wife said he said he couldn't breathe, and then he laid down, and then he said he started to sound like he was gargling, and I was like, that sounds like congestive heart failure, like the fluids building back up in his lungs. And it was ironic that my career gave me closure on that part of my life that I didn't have.
I just interviewed a guy, Rick Mountcastle, who was the lawyer that took Purdue Pharma to court. And they were the ones that created OxyContin. And
Mm,
so, your father obviously was probably one of the very many people that were caught up in the ripple effect of initially be given prescription
mhm.
opioids. And then, a lot of people, obviously, when the pill mills and those closed down, that created, people moving into other areas to get that. But literally millions of people have died from that, and that was FDA approved through a corrupt government at the time. So
Yeah.
this I mean, it breaks my heart, but yeah, I mean, there's so many. I remember a full arrest I went to, and I was still an EMT at the time, and we pushed Narcan, and I was at the head, and I'm like, dude, I swear I saw some light go back into his eyes, but I wasn't the medic. My friend was the lead medic, and So he carried on all the other drugs. But I guarantee you that was another guy. I think he was in construction, had shoulder surgery, was given opiates, and we never got him back. So yeah, I mean the ripple effect of that kind of, gross corruption and all the people, the lives that are affected. I'm sorry that your family was one of them.
Yeah, and at the time, I was kind of blinded to it. I kind of was just like, he's just taking pills for his back. I didn't think of it as anything other than that. And then, like I said, the more and more I started running calls and running things, and I started putting them together, like a lot of people that have surgery or anything like that that use pain pills end up addicted to them, or to the point where they're like, they can't find any other remedy to help them. And that's kind of what led me into my research about CBD when I was in Charlotte. That's what led me to my research about that, was how many firefighters put off a surgery or put off a treatment until they retire because they either don't want to get hooked on pain pills, or they just would rather not get in trouble for having pain pills and needing them on duty and not being able to do their job. So there was a lot behind that research, and with CBD, it was very promising, but I had came to a head really quick when I talked to the city, and the city drug policy lady was kind of like, "This is not drug policy lady talking to a firefighter. This is say her name's Tiffany. Tiffany talking to DJ. Your job and what cannabis is they'll never mesh. They'll never be able to be accepted together, because we stand for something a lot more honorable, when the stigma on cannabis is not as honorable, so to speak, but there's also that stigma on cannabis and psychedelics and all the other things that are there that could possibly help us."
Yeah,
So,
it's crazy. I mean, the zero THC CBD needs zero discussion with anyone anyway, because you are literally taking just hemp. There's no THC in it, and I think the Rescue One CBD is the one that I would send people to. But that is so sad, because yes, you can go to a physician and get muscle relaxers and opioids and psych meds, and it's totally fine. But you take something that's been extracted from the hemp plant, and let's say it's zero THC, so even that 0.3% has been removed, and there's all this stigma. Well, the CBD is just simply going to be therapeutic for you. All those other drugs will actually alter your state of mind. So there's stigma around the wrong things. That's the problem.
And the stigma, and that's my biggest thing for being an advocate for what we do, and how that can help us, is because the stigma is so negative for so long that it's so hard to say, hey, this is actually something that's going to help us. This is actually something that is going to help the newer generation coming in, that are going to have to see certain things they've never seen ever. Like, I don't think anybody's supposed to see the things we've seen in 14 years in their lifetime. So think about what they can use to help with the coping mechanisms for that. So, and the stigma on psychedelics also is just as bad. Psychedelics and cannabis are both just as bad, but the benefits for anybody that takes them is astronomical. It's amazing to see that, and that's like in Waves and War. I have been immersed by that movie. I've watched it like 5 times, over and over, just picking different things apart from Marcus, DJ, and Maddie's stories. And I showed it to a couple of guys at the fire department the other day, and they were like, "Man, they look like firefighters. That sounds like what I go through daily." And I was like, "Yes." So, and as we keep watching and we keep relating the trauma that they went through and the trauma that we've been through or continue to go through, I guess I started doing some neurological study, and from the way I interpret it is, trauma is trauma. The brain doesn't decipher where you get that trauma from. It's trauma, and how the brain processes it is the same way. Whether they were in battle or we were doing CPR on an infant, that trauma still has those same effects on our brains. And then you add the TBI or concussions from football, because I played football, and you don't know what concussion gave you the TBI or what flashbang gave you that TBI, but it's there, and it has the same effect as the concussion that Aaron Hernandez had or whatnot.
Well, and the other thing that we have in common, I was just spent literally last week, I was around a bunch of SEALs. I did the documentary premiere for 7X, where it's out in Dallas. And then I went down to Echelon Front, where, Jocko and Leif Babin's conference that they put on. There's a load of SEALs attached to that as well. But that community has leaned very heavily into psychedelics, especially ibogaine. But the thing that we also have in common with, ironically, the military, but also incarcerated people, is a high level of childhood adversity that drives us into the military, into police, fire, EMS, because we want to help. We also want, in a way, a distraction from the thing that we're trying not to think about. So when we go through these therapies, more often than not, you hear it wasn't the fire, it wasn't the PD code, it wasn't, Fallujah. It was actually, what happened when you were 8, 9, 10, 12. So I see that as a commonality as well. These medicines are allowing us to revisit some of these traumas and then reframe them. And now that carries on the healing.
Yeah, I noticed that. One of the ones that set with me was when DJ Shipley was talking about he was cutting the grass and he ran over the root and his dad freaked out on him. And then he ended up doing that to his daughter. And I was like, that's absolutely, it's insane that's one of the things that the medicine brought to him. It was like, this is what you need to focus on. You've seen this, and this is what you didn't want to be, and this is what you are. So I started watching a show. Well, I watched it a long time ago, but it was called The Mind. It's on Netflix, The Mind Explained, and they talk about psychedelics. And they talk about one of the words I heard so many times in Waves and War was ego, was that voice inside your head. And when I watched the Mind Explained, they said your ego comes from your default mode network. Your prefrontal cortex is speaking with, I can't remember what the other part was. I have to go back and look at it, but it's where your ego is. It's what makes up your identity. So for, like you said, for all of us that are in the business of the fire service or military, it's like we have that ego that needs to be, I guess you could say, revisited every time we go through a different part of life. So with kids from childhood, so you're looking at your father, who is the only man that you really have to model, and you're trying to be like him, but he's not accepting you as a person or even as a man. So you're pushing yourself to get approval as a man for years. So then once you get to that point where now I'm in middle school, now I've already changed from elementary. There's another ego change, another identity change. And if you're an athlete, that's another thing that goes on top of it. Somebody says your coach comes to you, and a lot of players that don't have fathers see their coaches as their fathers. So they see their coach say, I need you to make this play. I need you to make this shot. And that puts another level of pressure on you to seek that approval. And it just keeps on compounding until you become an adult. And now you're like, what's my career? So many times as men, we question our identity. We question what we're supposed to do. You know what I mean? And you're always seeking that approval. And then in Waves and War, when Marcus was just like, this ain't none of my fault. Like, I did the best I could with what I had, and it's not my fault. And it's like you could see, I could literally see the change from the pictures that were popping up to who we were talking to in the interviews. And I was like, they look so much healthier. They look so much better just from that little bit of treatment. And I was like, why are we not pushing this out to the people that need it? It blows my mind.
When you look back now, because we'll get into your football, you talked about how the coach becomes a mentor or a father figure even. Was that an element of your upbringing too?
Pretty much. Like my mom, she was a single mom, and my dad we lived around the same area, so he would come pick me up, and he was at my games. But when it came to me having that in the house, I didn't have that. So when I go play football or when I go wrestle, mainly football and wrestling, and then I had a track coach that was the best track coach in the state for a while. And those three guys would always shape me and help me to be the best I could and put out everything and give everything on the field. So when that translated to the fire service, or when that translated to college, when I focused in on just playing football for college, it was almost the same effect, where you're like, I'm still seeking that approval. Like I'm still making sure that I keep my coach happy because that's the person that believes in me right now the most. You know what I mean?
You know, it's really interesting because I've had this conversation a lot with people that, like yourself, that were high level athletes in school, college, or maybe even beyond. And then the coaches, strength and conditioning and the actual, skills coaches. And when I moved to America about 22 years ago, I've told the story a lot. I started realizing that a lot of the guys I would talk to that were in their like late 20s, early 30s, it was almost like this Uncle Rico story over and over again. I coulda, woulda, shoulda had it not been for my ACL, my,
Oh
labrum.
yeah.
And I started thinking, like, what the hell are we doing to youth athletes in this country? Because where I came from and the era I came from, you didn't really have that high level of performance in schools and colleges unless you were clearly going to be, a Premier League football player or, just one of
Mm-hmm.
those. And then, of course, yeah, you could go through the farm leagues and, be groomed to be a high level athlete. But the rest of us were just playing sport for fun. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
Play other schools, but there was no, gym time, for example. We weren't in the weight room. There was no weight
Oh
room,
yeah.
have to pick up sheep
So that
and bench press them. But
well, that's what I've seen because I've got four boys and they're in all different levels of sport. I got a college athlete, I got a high school athlete, I have a fifth grader that he plays with middle schoolers. He'll be able to play up. So when he'll be in middle school, then I got a 9-year-old that plays. I mean, he's just a monster on the field. And they all are like from the top down. They can all play baseball, but there's so many guys like you said that didn't get that chance to make it, but had all the tools that are teaching the younger generation how to do it. And that's where you're getting higher caliber athletes and higher caliber firefighters and police officers because the people that are done are passing on that information. I know for me, I pay a lot of attention to some of the veterans in the fire service because when I was at Salisbury, the guys that were teaching me were fighting fire before I was even born. Like they were fighting fire in 85, 86, and I was born in 88, and they're teaching me how to do what they do. They've been on for 30 years. So I learned old school way. Salisbury taught me the old school way to be a firefighter. So and I that's my base level of training. There's a captain that was in Charlotte, he's retired, and his one of his lines was when shit hits the fan, we revert to our lowest level of training. And I'm like, he's got a point. Like my lowest level of training is old school firefighting. You know what I mean? So I take pride in having that because not many people are going to know what that old school type of firefighting is because we don't fight fire as much anymore like we used to. Now some places do, and some places do. When you train on it, you get a chance to use it, but some places don't. Some of our stations in Charlotte don't. They're just slower stations, and they don't fight fire as much. So we have to work on honing that skill a whole lot more by talking to veterans and people that have been through it before.
yeah, no, I agree with that experience. I agree completely with the injuries. Though I realized that a lot of the high schools and colleges would squeeze out performance from the youth athletes, but at the expense of their longevity, of their well-being.
Their
And
brain.
you just kind of made me think one of the elements that's probably contributing to that is exactly like you said, because there's this mentorship element. Kids are putting all their trust in this person. They actually want to impress this person. So
Oh yeah.
when they're asked to maybe do things that are too much, they're just not questioning it. So it shows how important it is for responsibility at the coaching
Mm-hmm.
level to find that balance between, yeah, I want to win this high school game, but if I keep drilling these kids and they, their shoulder or knee doesn't work anymore, macro level, what was the point? Yeah, we won the game, but now that kid
Mm-hmm.
never plays sport again. That we've
Yeah.
just destroyed the life of that adult then. So I think it's a really important conversation. You can have both, and the high level, athletes a lot of times they do, but at the high school and college level, especially maybe some of the ones that don't have the most well versed coaches, the
Mm-hmm.
danger is that the win becomes more important than the actual well being of their team.
Absolutely. And that translates through from childhood to, like you said, being an athlete to even being in the military. The military asked those guys to go fight, put their lives on the line And then when they get back, it's like, thanks, see you later. They ask us as firefighters to beat ourselves up, sleep deprivation, anxiety, heart issues, cancer, all that stuff. And then at the end of it, oh, you don't have insurance. And you're like, well, okay, now we'll give you a little something to supplement for not having insurance when you retire. But you got mental health issues. Oh, we got a little bit of things here. And one of the questions when I got on the peer support team in Charlotte was on a questionnaire. They said, do you feel like Charlotte provides an adequate amount of resources for mental health? And when I first started, I was like, I don't really know. I don't really know if they do. Now it's gotten a lot broader to the point where we have like a flow chart that lets you know, like, this is how you need to evaluate yourself to know when to go get help. You know what I mean? But the approval, like you said, the seeking that approval is what your identity comes from, because like I said, you look at your coach and your coach is like, lay it on the line. And you're like, okay, I'm going to lay it on the line for this guy. You'll do the same thing for a captain that you have respect for. On the fire truck, if a captain looks at you and says, we need to take this wall down, and you're like, all right, and you don't even question it, you go take the wall down, and now you're waiting for the next thing. There's some people that won't do that for a captain they don't respect. They won't do that for a chief they don't respect. They'll be like, no, I don't want to do that, chief. And now you're sitting here fighting with people, trying to get them to do the job. And so there becomes a certain level of respect that comes into that. Like, there's no doubt that the people that their dads treat them like crap, they still have a level of respect for them for some reason. It's their father, So when you don't have that and you have a coach or a captain or just another person that you come across that just really resonates, you meet them at work, you see that you want to keep on trying to improve for that person to give you praise or whatnot. And that's where the lay it on the line comes from, is when you seek that approval and you seek that praise and you continue to beat yourself up. So the movie Concussion, when I watched it, I was just sitting there looking at it, and when the doctor first discovered it, and I was like, when they looked back at Webster's career in the NFL, and like he laid it on the line, and then he ended up being homeless, self-mutilating himself, and then eventually he ended up dying from it. And it's just like, that's like, we are asked that as men, as people in society, to continue to provide, to continue to show up. You know what I mean? And we don't ever think about us. We don't ever think about, how do I feel in this whole situation?
Absolutely. What about TBIs? What position were you playing in football?
I played defensive end and tight end, and we were in the trenches. It was always a fight in the trenches every time. So like, on defense, you make a hit, make a tackle, and you're just like, and you wake up. And I say wake up because you hit the ground and you open your eyes, and it's still fuzzy, and it's still like the light. Of course, you got the Friday night lights, but then it's just like, it's still fuzzy. You're just like, man, that was a good hit. But then it's just like, my head hurts. But it's not bad enough to where I'm like, I'm going to leave the game. It's not bad enough to where I'm like, I need to take a break. I'm going to just go line up and do it again and do it again and again and again and again. And sometimes you get to the point where you're hitting somebody just as big as you, just as fast as you, and y'all are hitting just as hard. And I was like, that's insane. I never had a true concussion, but the little concussion, everybody says the micro concussions still have the same effect. And I was like, I know I've had some of that, where you hit somebody, you just kind of dazed for a minute. So I've seen the TBIs in Waves and War, when they said that Marcus and DJ and those guys were diagnosed with TBIs from concussions, from breaches and stuff like that, and explosives going off. And I was like, I wonder if it's like, if that has to be like the same correlation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, but the same as I look back, I didn't play rugby. We don't really have football. We have football, but not the same football in England. But I didn't play like a tackling sport, but I was a martial artist. So I got kicked in the head and punched in the head. And so when I look back, it's like, okay, yeah, no, I did. Especially as I actually got into my 20s, I really, really took some headshots. So yeah, I mean, and then you add that to sleep deprivation, which we'll get into in a bit. that
Mhm.
actually has the same impact on the neurons as trauma does, where the myelin sheath gets what they call demyelinated, so it
Mhm.
degrades, excuse me. And so you have the same thing. So if you've got TBIs and chronic sleep deprivation, you're basically doubling down on the damage then.
Yes, so that was one of the reasons I went into looking into like the neurology of TBIs, trauma on the brain and stuff like that. And I had at one point I thought just trauma can damage brain cells, but then I looked and I said, it has to be something else in there to damage the brain cells. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes the trauma from the concussions is what damages the brain cells, and that's what kickstarts the CTE and whatnot. But like when you think about how our brain communicates, especially like I'm sure we're probably going to get later on and talking about psychedelics and what they do with the brain. But when you think about how the brain communicates, and the way I looked at it with CBD is when you have a traumatic experience, it's like a pig path through the woods or a deer path through the woods. It's a beaten path all the way through. So anytime our brain associates anything with anything close to that trauma, it goes back to that moment. So you can walk by a car that was yellow and you ran a call 10 years ago of a yellow car with it's just stuck in your mind, and it takes you back to that 10 years, and you're on that road of trauma again. And that's kind of like what I thought. Okay, that road of trauma is those brain cells being used too much, and that creates damage to the brain cell. But the more I looked at it, they said that the TBI is what kickstarts that, and whatnot.
So you mentioned about playing football in college. What were you studying?
I studied sports management, so I wish I so sports management was what I stopped on. I was originally business, and I was like, this is too much. I am not going to be a businessman. That's not my path. So I switched from business to sports management. I was like, I can do that. And um, what's funny about that was my senior thesis of sports management my professor. I wrote a paper on the benefits of marijuana and neurological diseases like um, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia, um, PTSD, because I wanted to go into the military when I graduated college, and because it popped into my head for the military is because I was recruited by the Citadel College. They came and got me out of class. This big giant dude came and got me out. He was talking about football and everything. And he says, "Well, we practice at 4 o'clock in the morning." I was like, "You do what? You practice? You practice at 4 o'clock?" He said, "We practice at 4 to 6, and then you get dressed. You go PT before class." I was like, "I'm 18. There's no way my mind is even motivated enough to get up and do that." So, but the Citadel came and talked to me, and that's kind of where I was like, I can go into the military after college. So PTSD was one of the things that I talked about as far as how cannabis can help with that. And then the last thing was cancer treatments. So I wrote a paper on a senior thesis, handed it to my professor, and my professor was like, "This is a very good paper." He told me that he said you might want to continue researching those things, the correlation between those two. And I was just like, I'm just trying to graduate college. Like, I'm just trying to write a good paper and graduate college. I'm not even thinking about that. And now it's come around full circle to where that seems to be what I need to be focusing on. You know what I mean? To try and help people that have mental health issues in the fire service, in the military, police officers. I guess you could say first responders and military. Yeah.
I need to send it to you. I had a guest on, or two. I had Paige Figgy, who was the mother of Charlotte. So that's Charlotte's Web with the CBD
Mm-hmm.
story. That was her daughter. But then I also had Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, who I think she's in California, but she treats cancer patients with marijuana. So with THC specifically. So,
Okay.
Paige's story is pure CBD. Bonnie is actually THC. But like you said, there are all these diseases where it's incredibly effective. Even things like
Yeah.
bulimia and anorexia, where you're trying to get people to eat again. and then the chemo treatments, the THC is giving people an appetite and they want to eat. So now for you, you're nourishing the body again. But as we touched on earlier, both of these are vilified, but yet they are incredibly therapeutic. Now, I don't like THC. I don't like the high or any of that stuff. So it's not even the drug that I would be advocating for personal experience. But when you hear it helps other people and is so safe in the same time, why would you not be, making it as available as possible for anyone to use therapeutically?
That's my question, because and so I looked at it for anyone, the people that reached out to me when I was doing my CBD studies, they wanted it for pain management and sleep. And I was like, so PTSD wasn't even a thought process when they were initially asking me about CBD. And I was like, okay, so let's focus in on sleep. Let's focus in on pain management and sleep. And I'm just like, the only way, after watching the ways, the only way you can even get access to this stuff is if you're inactive or you're retired, because it's illegal, and it's like, that doesn't help us now. Like I said, you want me to lay my life on the line every shift, but when I look to do something to help myself, it's like, no, you can't do that. And it's like, okay, I'll just sit here and suffer for the next 20 years until I retire, and then I'll go get the help I need. And I'm like, there's got to be a different way to go about it, whether it's education, whether it's rescheduling. I don't know what that is, but there's got to be a different way to go about introducing those things to first responders and military, other than like the way Vets is doing with Marcus and those guys. They're doing it very good. I wanted to get the fire service on board with that, to kind of just be like, yes, it helps all of us. Yeah, it helps them. They went and fought overseas and fought in wars and away from their families. I'm away from my family too. And the trauma of the things we've seen has the same effects. They're getting help, and I'm sure it can help us in the long run, because firefighters commit suicide. Firefighters, that was one of the things that really, that was one of the stories from college. So like when I was in college, we had a guy, he was a swimmer. So my roommate was best friends with him. That guy ended up killing himself, and we went to the funeral. And I don't know how this resonates with you, but bagpipes at funerals, it kills me. It breaks me down. The bells, when they ring the bell, and the bagpipes at funerals drop me, because when I was at that funeral for the guy that killed himself in college, when his casket, I still remember it vividly. When his casket hit the concrete to go into the cemetery, the guy started playing the bagpipes, and I broke down, because I was just like, that's something I've never experienced. And then I become a firefighter and go to Salisbury, where they had two LODDs, which was Justin Monroe and Victor Eisler, and they'd have the memorial for them every year, and the bagpipes are played, and it just keeps on resonating. That bagpipe sound resonates in my head every time I think about an LODD or anything like that.
I think I wrote about it in One More Light. When I was a lifeguard in London, there was a guy, this is pre-fire service, there was a guy that used to practice the bagpipes on Hampstead Heath, which is a big park in North London, where I lifeguard on the ponds and in the pool. And it was cool. You'd walk to work and you'd hear this, guy playing these tunes, and like, oh, that's nice. And then, go off to work, and then you become a firefighter. And, 6 funerals later, you're like, I cannot hear bagpipes anymore. I just can't. I mean, not to the point where I'm triggered and, I'm going to burst into tears, but people are like, oh, we got the, firefighter memorial. I'm like, okay, good. Have fun. Because I mean, it's just twofold for me. It's firstly, I don't want to hear bloody bagpipes anymore, because, it's the wailing of the families and the last call, like you said. But the other thing is with some of these memorials is when you are, as we're talking about, when there are solutions and there's a resistance to the solutions, now some of these memorials make me angry, because we're so good at putting on Class Bs and bringing on the honor guard and playing the drums and the bagpipes. But then when you come to them and say, well, what about CBD? What about 2472? What about, clean cab? All these things, like, oh, we don't want to hear any of that. We just want to be really good at burying our people. And that, I've realized recently, actually pisses me off. So where it used to be nostalgic and honorable, now it just makes me angry.
Yeah, because like you said, you're sitting here and you've already seen so many people die from this job, whether it's military, fire, any of that. You've seen it and you hear the bagpipes, and you know that there's a solution. You know that there's a way to help us. And therapy sometimes, yes, therapy is good. Therapy is a maintenance. To me, from what I've noticed, ibogaine and DMT, that is like that's what's gonna open you up and tell you what your problem is. Therapy forces you to talk about it. Actually, meditating and mindfulness forces you, like, makes you hone that skill of how to continue to change that circuitry in your brain to get better. But just the kickback from my research, I was just like, so, and it halted me. That's why me and you hadn't got back in touch for so long, because it halted all my research. The episode that I called you on was I can't find it anymore because I went on Apple. I went on Apple and it stopped. It started like episode three something, and I
Hmm.
was like, I know we talked before that. Before episode three something was when I reached out to you. I think it was like 150 or something like that. And I was like, "Where's the rest of your episodes?" And I couldn't find them, so I was going to go back and look again to see if I could find that doctor. It was a sleep doctor, and
Is
his
it Kirk
episode,
Parsley?
it might have been
Yeah, because you
because he,
on the
he
website you can go all the way back. A lot of these podcast apps, it's only like 300, 500, and then it stops. So this is why I do the repost of the bonus episodes now to put them back on the top of the pile.
yeah, because I remember listening to that episode, and it was right in the middle of my research, and I heard the whole thing. I had just started narrowing it down to being sleep. Sleep deprivation was the thing that was killing us or hurting us and destroying us. And I listened to that episode, and I was like, man, that was a good episode. And the things he was saying, I knew I understood exactly what was going on. That's when I reached out to you, and we talked about it and whatnot.
Well, let's talk about your journey into the fire service. So you're doing sports management, you're playing college ball. How does that lead you into the fire department?
So when I finished up at Catawba, I went to Catawba College. It was a Division II football program. Finished up there, and I was in the work. I was trying to find a job, so I was going and doing desk jobs and communications centers. And I was like, this is terrible. I do not want to sit behind this desk and put a suit and tie on every day. So then I ended up getting a job, just a real quick job at the daycare that was behind the Catawba. And it was funny because some of the moms would come in to pick up their kids, and I'm this giant dude holding a baby, and they're just like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like, "They're fine. They're like a little baby." But the head of HR in Salisbury reached out to me, and the reason I chose fire department was because when I was sitting at home before, when I stopped doing the whole interviews for desk jobs, I put an application at Spencer PD, and an application at Spencer Fire Department. And I said, whoever calls first, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. The fire department calls first. And the chief there was a captain in Salisbury. And he says, hey, he said, I think Salisbury is doing a live-in program. You should apply for it. I was like, all right. So I went ahead and applied for it. They reached back out to me and said they're not hiring anybody, but we are doing the live-in program at some point. We'll be in touch. So I continued to work at the daycare. And one day my friend that was in HR called me because her brother used to be a firefighter in Salisbury. Calls me and says, "Hey, are you serious about being a firefighter?" I was like, "Absolutely." She says, "Chief Parnell wants to meet with you in 10 minutes," and I had to run home. It was a mad dash to run home, get dressed, get cleaned up, to go to the fire station and sit down. So I get to the fire station, I sit down with Chief and all the chiefs, and they talk about it. And I tell them my background as a football player and wanting to serve the community. You know, the normal things you want to do as a firefighter. And they said, all right, well, we'll get back in touch with you. So they send me through the living program, and I go to end up going to Concord Fire Department for their recruit school. And James, I hate running. Running is the absolute worst thing ever. And what's funny about it is that was the only thing they did was run. And I was like, I'm tired of this. But I pushed through it. I got through it, finished recruit school, and I started Salisbury for 4.5 years. Um, that was like I said, it was an old school. It was an old school department, old school guys teaching us how to be firefighters. We had a bunch of young guys that were heavy hitters, and we fought a lot of fire in Salisbury. We learned a lot in Salisbury because we trained all the time. And then I made driver. I was getting ready to make lieutenant, and then I ended up going to Charlotte. And once again, James, I hate running. I hate running.
And they
It is
ran a
the
lot.
worst. But they ran a lot, and I was the slowest. I was the slowest runner in my recruit class because I'm just a big person. I was like, I'm tired of this. But I finished. You had to run a mile and a half in under 12 minutes, and
It's a decent
the
pace.
funniest that's a real fast pace for me. Like, so I'm sitting here and it gets to the last time and we're doing apparatus hydraulics, and the chief that was down there, Lance Folk, he comes to me, and he's a scary dude. He comes to me, he says, I'm on the turntable doing the aerial, he says, you already know how to do all that shit. He said, get down here. And he takes me into the tower classroom. He's like, and he's just staring at me, and I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble. I've messed up somewhere. And he says, you got to run. And I was like, I know, chief. He said, no, you got to run. I don't want to fire you. And I was like, I don't want you to fire me either. Like, I'll run. So I kind of crash course myself in running, and I ran miles, like overtrained running, to the point where I was like, I'm about to lose it if I had to run anymore. But on the day I passed my PFQ, we're walking down the above because my training captain was like, I don't want you to exert yourself too much. You got to put all you got into that run. That's that approve. That's that. Hey, you got to do this. And I was like, I got to do this. That was that identity change of I have to run. So we get down there and we're running, and I'm good. And all of a sudden, I can feel it. There's like this little stab in my rib. Will start hurting, and I'll start doing this right here while I'm running, and then I'll start leaning over, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to die. And this is the part of recruit school that I want to make sure that anybody else that goes through recruit school keeps to their heart. The dudes and the guys and girls you go through recruit school with, that is your rock. Those people are going to push you through everything. And it translates to on the truck. Your company, your crew, that's your rock. You lean on those guys. So the last lap I had, I was about to stop running. I was like, I'm gonna quit. And I was like, but I felt two hands. So two of my guys in my recruit schools, Richard Evans and Adam Starnes, grabbed my shirt. They grabbed my shoulder and they pushed me, and they started sprinting. And so as I'm running, like I'm almost bounding, and they're pushing me as every step that they can. And I'm like, if it wasn't for those dudes, I wouldn't have passed. You know what I mean? If it wasn't for the rest of the guys in the class, because we were class 100, so it was kind of like a spotlight on us because we were the 100th recruit class in Charlotte. And if it wasn't for those guys, I would have stopped running. Everybody around me, my crew, my whole group stayed with me until I got to the end, and I sprinted out everything I had to get to the end. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I finished it. I think I had like 11:58. I was like, I'm good. I'm good to go. But that's one of the things about recruit school, about basic training. The people that you go through that stuff with, they are your brothers. You have to keep them close because they're going to help you get through all that stuff. So you want to know some more about my career at Charlotte?
Yeah, go for it.
So once I get out of recruit school in Charlotte, once again another running story. Which, like I told you, I hate running. After you get off probation, you have to go back down and do a final PFQ, which is a final performance of fitness test to get off of probation. So I go back down there, and my training captain came and brought us down there a month early, and was like, "All right, we're gonna go in September, or we're gonna go in. I think he said September, and then October was my final day to do it." So I go down there, and I'm running. I feel like I'm doing good, and he looks at me, he pulls me to the side, he says, "You ain't gonna make it." I was like, "Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Don't take me off of this run. I'm gonna make it." He says, "You ain't gonna make it. Go get ready. Go run some more and get better." So I had a month to prepare and get ready to run. So one of my friends, He was a retired battalion chief in Charlotte, and I knew him from one of my volunteer departments in Rowan County. Dale Brown. I ran with him, and he tried to kill me. He tried to kill me a couple times because I mean we ran a lot, but he prepared me for that final PFQ. So the division chief of training was down there. He was doing my PFQ with me, and like I said, it's a funny story with me and running. So I do my PFQ. We go down there. He says you got to make them run in 15 minutes, and I was like, I can do that. I think I can do that. So I start running, but as I'm going down and coming back, I have I have a training captain pacing me. So he's behind me. As long as he's behind me, I'm ahead of pace. He started getting closer and closer. And I'm like, oh, I got to speed up. So I'd speed up some more. He started getting closer and closer. I'm like, man, I'm going to get fired. Well, my current engine captain, my training captain, and my battalion chief were all at the training academy for chief officer development class. And I'm like, okay, well, my battalion chief goes and gets my training captain and my actual captain and says, hey, Shipp's about to get fired. Y'all need to come on down here. And he's like, what? So my training captain, he's crazy. He's crazy. He comes down there in his blue shirt and his blue shirt and everything because he's in class. And he takes another training captain's shoes, running shoes, and he runs me down, and I can hear him. So I'm running, and I hear feet, and I'm like, somebody's running real fast. And I look back, and it's my training captain. He comes into my ear, and he's like, Shipp, you got to run. And I was like, okay. So I run, and I get back, and then I just start sprinting because I'm like, I look up, the division chief's he's running towards me to get me. My actual captain from the engine is coming to get me. And then my battalion, I'm like, so I'm about to get fired. I am running too slow. So I sprint to the end of the cone. I collapse. They show me, he's like, 1348, you passed. And I was like, oh, running is the absolute worst thing ever. But it definitely pushes you to say, hey, you're gonna if you want to get better, or if you want to lose weight, you want to get better, go run. That's the only way you're gonna do it, running.
Well, I like that too, because you're talking about the camaraderie. And I remember, in the basic fire academy and some of the academies I have for departments, it was that. I mean, if there was a person that wasn't prepared to put the effort in, then yeah, no one had any time for them. But anyone that was trying, and let's just say they weren't extremely strong in some of the strength events, or like you said, they weren't excelling in the endurance side. Like I remember over and over and over again, it was like, all right, well then let's go get them. And the whole, whatever it was, group or whatever the subsection was, would go back and we'd all run through them. And everyone has a bad day, or, a skill or an element of strength or endurance that they're not as good at. But there is no rock star in the fire service that just runs around on their own. Like it is a group event. It is a team. So I love that, because that's how it should be. And then, like I said, if someone just isn't willing to put the time in, or the heart isn't in it, then they will ring the bell and they won't be there anymore. But if someone is trying and everyone can see they're trying, I think the instructors like to see that too. When everyone else wraps around them and like, no, we're not leaving you behind. Come on, you can do this. I think that's what forges a good firefighter, to be honest.
Because that shows heart. That shows that I can tell you to do something and you're going to do it until it gets done. You're not going to half-ass it. You're not going to be like, I don't feel like doing that. I'm like, hey, he pushed through the run. He pushed through the recruit school. He'll push through this task that I ask.
Exactly.
So that's a big thing for me, that time in recruit school.
What made you go from one department to the other?
This is the weirdest thing. You can go from one side to another, one extreme to the other. And that's one of the unique parts about Charlotte. But then you have the different places like the airport, which is, I'm a captain at the airport now. So I made captain a few months ago and got stationed at the airport. So I was at the airport when I started my career for 6 years. Then I went to Engine 15 to drive for 3, and then I'm back at the airport as a captain. And it's the slowest station in the city. Station 41 is the slowest station in the city. So I went from the third busiest engine to the slowest station in the city. And it's like, gosh, I went from not sleeping to sleeping out all night. And it's such a dynamic thing that you can move around from one station to another and change the entire clientele you deal with in Charlotte. And it's a big city too, so I mean, going downtown has its perks. It has its perks, but it also has its how you say challenges. So a lot of people that go downtown, they're ready for a challenge. They want to challenge themselves to learn standpipes, to learn elevators, to learn the grid system of the city. Like if you miss, like how, especially for drivers, you're learning those streets in a certain way to help you be a better driver in downtown. Same thing works for the outskirts, but downtown is just different. When you sit there and look at the grid, and you're just like, that's crazy. And how tight it is, you got to be a good driver to be down there anyway. So
Yeah.
it,
Yeah, I think she was on Queen Street. It was near the Hornets Stadium. Have I got that right? Where the
oh
Hornets
yeah,
play. But yeah,
hmm
I was struck by. I mean, yeah, they were narrow. There was the train system, which again, you got to be careful not to get hit by a train down there.
yeah.
And then also, there seemed to be a lot of homelessness too that I noticed.
Yes. So there was a stretch where they had these. It was called Tent City. It was right there in downtown, and I mean they had hundreds of tents set up, and like they had like it was like a little community. They had like a mayor of Tent City. He would come around, and everybody knew who he was, and it's just like that's weird. But it was it was weird that they had that, but then they ended up cleaning. They were trying to clean up that stuff, so they tore everything down and push everybody out to the different parts of the city so they can clean up downtown and whatnot. But there's a lot of homeless people that walk around, especially in the area where I was at 15. That we had a few homeless people that I mean we knew their names. We knew their names. It was like, hey, that's Heather, or hey, that's oh, what would they call them? Shoeless Joe, all kinds of stuff. Just different things, names we had for these people because we see them all the time.
There was one. It's funny because you talk about the dangerous areas being blocks from the affluent areas. I had that in Orange County when I was there, and they talk
Mm-hmm.
about wrong side of the tracks. It was literally that Orange Avenue. One side was one of our most dangerous, poverty-stricken areas, and then the other side were $1 million homes on the lake. And our
Oh yeah,
first use spanned both those. But the next first due over, one of the homeless women that we go on all the time was a former nurse, and she got addicted to opioids. You know what I mean? So this is
yeah.
what's so sad is that we tar everyone with the same brush when it comes to they're bums, they're homeless, but these are all
Mm-hmm.
people that back to one of your previous jobs, like when you were in daycare and all those preschoolers are everywhere. You weren't looking at them
Oh
going, oh
yeah,
well, there's a junkie and there's a bum and there's a crackhead and there's a hooker. No, they were all little kids, and yet for some
kids.
reason they become dehumanized when they're unhoused, and now they're just a nuisance. What
Yeah,
about
and
positive solutions? What is Charlotte trying to do to actually, rather than move them on, actually rehabilitate, overcome addiction, find people housing?
there's some affordable housing that goes up. So like every time something goes up, a certain section of it is dedicated to affordable housing to help people just have somewhere to stay. And and that was one of the things that a lot of people don't understand. Like when you run to like newer apartment buildings, knowing at some point this apartment building's gonna be run down. At some point, this place is not gonna look the same because they're gonna be putting people in there that just it's like not that they don't care. It's just it is what it is to them, you know. So they have some of that. There's a couple homeless shelters in different parts of the city, which yeah, you get tired of running those two. You're like, oh, we're going to the homeless shelter again. Going to the men's shelter, going to the women's shelter. But there are programs that are helping people get into those shelters and get spots at night when it's getting cold or it's time to go. Because I've always told it was one of our jokes we had on the truck is if you put me out here with these people on the streets, I die. I
Mm-hmm.
am not. They are tactical bums, I guess you could say. Like I don't know how they've survived these harsh conditions, but like they always continue to survive. And I'm just like, I I asked the question to myself multiple times driving through intersections at the Plaza and Eastway. I'm just like, I hope that none of my kids end up out here. Somebody's daughter or somebody's son or brother or nephew or uncle is out here walking around either high on drugs, just anything. It's rough, and I'm just like, I'll make sure I take care of my children and give them that. Don't be that way, but also don't necessarily turn your back completely on them. Like they're people too, and that's the hardest part is when you get busy like that, your humanity kind of just you kind of take it down because you're just like, I'm here, it's another bum, go get a job, or hey, I'm here again, it's another bum, get clean. And the more you run it, the like you get almost calloused to it. That's the sad part about how many times we run bums or how many times we run certain people is you get callous. You're just like, all right, get up. You're not really giving them that care that you would want if you were in the other position. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. And personally, you look at, we are literally one of the most affluent nations on the planet. So the fact we have homelessness, full stop, is bad. But then on
Yeah.
top of that, I think it's 10% of our homeless are veterans. So those are people that served in the military that we just discarded. I'd be curious to see how many were doctors, nurses, firefighters, etc., corrections, other people that served. But yeah, I mean, when we have the resources and if we proactively invested in society and gave addiction counseling, gave mental health counseling, focus more on, like you said, housing, but in a way that it empowers someone to stand on their own feet, to have pride in where they live, not destroy it. That we would make a huge dent. Would we get every single person? No. But I mean, that's the argument in America. It's like, well, look, it didn't work for that guy, so it doesn't work. It's like, well, but that's like saying, we've all seen them, those places that are abusing government housing, and they've got the Escalade on the front door, on the front porch, and, the kids are still running around dirty. Yeah, we all know those examples. But how many people have got back on their feet because of food stamps, because of government housing, and now they're thriving and they're paying taxes and doing well again? So, and I think currently there's even less compassion and altruism with this administration at the moment, which is probably even worse for our homeless population, I would imagine.
And it really just takes a little bit of ambition, a little bit of education on that person because, like you said, a lot of them were like actual contributing people in society, and then just mental health got to them. The addiction got to them. I watched I think it was Vice, where they were talking about what's it feel like to overdose, and the guy responded, "It's like slow dancing with God." And I was like, "Gosh, if that's his response of what the description of overdosing is, no wonder people keep continuing to try and overdose because it's like that's the best feeling they've ever had in their life." But like you said, what are they running from? What are they hiding from? Matty Roberts' story when he did the Ibogaine, he was like, Ibogaine took this away. It took the wave away. He said, "What's that in the back? That dirty box that's chained up, leaking everywhere. Let's address that box." And I was like, "There's a lot of people that have that box that they haven't addressed. There's a lot of people that have that veil over their issues that are keeping them from getting better, from getting off of the streets, from not being a drug addict or a heroin addict or anything like that." And it's not just drugs. There's people that are gambling, porn. There's so many things that alcoholism is probably the worst silent epidemic I've seen in the fire service because so many people drink alcohol to sleep. They drink alcohol to relax. They drink alcohol to not see the things that they see. And I'm just like, yo, we got to figure out let's figure that part out. Figure out why we're drinking so much. DUIs, policies are always changing because somebody gets a DUI, and now we got to figure out how to make sure they're okay, how to take care of them because, well, we didn't take care of their mental health issue. So now they've drank alcohol until they can't stand, and they're trying to drive home, and now they're in trouble. Well, let's address that before they get to drinking alcohol because I don't drink, but like one of my captains in Salisbury told me, he said, if you drink anything, call somebody to come get you. Call me. I will drive wherever you are and drive you home. And I was like, thanks, Cap. And I kind of keep that same mentality for myself. Like, if anybody's like, hey, we're going out drinking, if anybody needs something, call me. I can come pick you up. I don't drink. But, like, it's a silent epidemic. It's a silent thing where people are just slowly drinking their lives away to it. Now they don't have anything left. They don't have a family. They don't have a career. They don't have they don't have anything left but alcohol and the demons in their heads.
Well, I want to get to, when you started becoming engaged in the mental health side in the fire service, but just before we do, 14 years in fire now, what are some of the career calls? And they can be obviously big barn burner fires, or they can be simply calls where it was kindness and compassion, and it just, one of those ones that you remember.
So I can go ahead and give you my mental health story. So my mental health story started in Salisbury. I had just made engineer, and we got a drowning call in Salisbury. It was at the city park, and city park has a huge pond in the front of it. And I'm like, somebody drowned in there, and I can't swim. I can't swim at all. So a funny story. I went swimming with my kids. Me and my wife and kids went to this little pool or whatever, and it was about, I want to say it was like 10 feet deep, 10 feet, 10 to 12 feet. And one of the toys is down there. And I was like, I had been practicing. I had been getting a little bit stronger as a swimmer from like one corner to the next corner of the pool, like not far. And I got a little confident, and I looked at myself and I said, I can go get that toy. So I dove down, and when I got down to the bottom, I grabbed the toy and I started floating back up. So when I started floating back up, I went to kick, and my feet were already off the ground. So I was just suspended in the water, and I'm like, I'm about to drown. So I start kicking and screaming and get up to the top, and my wife is looking at me, and she's like, is he serious? And I was like, yes, I'm serious. And I went back under, and my kids were hanging on the side of the pool laughing. And they thought I was joking. I was like, no, I was dying. The lifeguard, she was probably 115 pounds, and she didn't even budge. She was like, I'm not going to save him. I'm not. He's too big. I'm not going to save him.
Throw in the ring.
Yeah. She was like, I'm not going over there. But I finally made it to the side, and I was like, I'm never doing that again. And I thought I was going to drown. But fast forward to that, we get to the call, and I remember certain things about the call. I remember pulling up, and I remember pulling the parking brake, and CMPD's, or not CMPD, Salisbury PD's, one of the patrol cars had the siren blaring. I don't know if he left it on to alert us or if he just left it on because he was in a hurry. But we get there, and there's two little boys standing off to the side. One's 10, one is 11, and then there was an 8-year-old in the water. So what happened was they were throwing rocks on the ice. It was a little retention pond. They were throwing rocks on the ice, and he went out there to get a bigger rock, and he said, man, this is solid. And when he jumped, he fell through the ice. And they said he bobbed up once, bobbed up again, and then he didn't come up anymore. So we get there. My captain looks at me, Eric Boss, he looks at me, he says, I'm going to have to jump in. And I'm like, Eric, it's cold. Like it was like free. It was like 30 or 40 degrees out there. And I'm like, dude, this is cold. Like, he's like, I got to go in. I got to see if I can find him. So he starts taking his shoes off. And at that time, the rescue one shows up, and they have a guy that's in a wetsuit. But so they brought the boat too. So they put the boat in the water, and my captain and the captain from the rescue get on the boat, and they're using roof hooks to kind of drag the water. And they probably did that for probably about 5 minutes because we asked the kids where he went in at. And then so they put the boat right there. They went in, and my captain says he was just about to say, we can't find him, to tell Halsey to get in the water. And he said he felt something, and he started pulling him up. So when he starts pulling him up, he sees a red puffy coat come up out of the water, and they grabbed him and said, we found him. So we yanked the boat back to our side, and when I reach in to pull the kid out to put him on the stretcher, when I picked him up, I grabbed one wrist because they had a wrist up. I grabbed his wrist because he's probably 80 pounds. And I picked him straight up, and I saw my oldest son's face on the kid. And I stopped for a minute, but then I was like, I can't stop. I put him on the stretcher, and I started doing CPR. And the whole time I'm looking over at him to see what they're doing, it's like I get glimpses of my oldest son. I'm just like, man, this is not good. I was like, this is not good. So I keep going and doing. I do CPR on this kid all the way to the hospital. We pass him off. while we're doing CPR, there's dirt coming out of his lungs. So I know, me knowing what I know that this isn't going to end well. So I continue doing CPR, pass him off to the nurses. The family shows up. And when the family shows up, they're looking at us like, hey, where's my loved one? And I'm like, okay. And I couldn't answer because I'm still a firefighter. So my captain says they have him back there. They're going to work on him, and then we leave. So they do a debriefing at the station real quick right then, and we're like, nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to talk. We don't know you. We're not talking. So then they come back and they do a round circle debriefing with everybody involved in the incident, and I was like, okay. So we get in there, and I'm telling everything, and it gets to me. I start talking, and when I get to the part where we're talking about the parents not being with the children, we were glad that one of those kids had a cell phone and he was able to call 911. But it hit me, and I broke down in front of all these people I don't know, people I do know, and I'm just like, all right, something's completely wrong with me right now with this call. So I talk about it. I end up going to therapy for a little bit, not a lot, just enough to kind of ease the sting of the thought or whatnot. And fast forward from that day, we ran a few more. There was nothing really after that call that really bothered me until I got to Charlotte, and we had. Oh, I was going through the engineer's assessment. So while I was going through the engineer's assessment, the level of stress in that assessment was high for me. And I hadn't addressed anything as far as sleep, as far as any other calls that I had been on. And we're at the lake house with my kids and my wife and family, and we're down at the boat slip and we're fishing, and I hear a splash, and I look back, and my 11-year-old, he was 8 at the time, fell in the boat slip, and my mind starts to spin because I can't swim, so I'm like, I can't jump in. So I'm like, I hope that when I reach down here that I can grab this kid, and he was kicking, and I jumped down on the dock and I reached down and I grabbed him. I grabbed his wrist, and when I pulled him up, I saw a red coat. I seen my oldest son, an 8-year-old. I saw my current Jarek. He's 11 now. I seen him in a red coat. It was all meshed together. Both incidents were meshed together, and I just kind of sat there holding him. And I was so messed up after that call, after picking him up out of that water, that I couldn't even make a taco. We had tacos later. I couldn't take a tortilla, put chicken, cheese, and lettuce on it to eat because I couldn't think straight. And that's when I realized that something was really wrong then. And that's when I started getting into the mental health side of it, because not just that one call. Like I've ran so many calls. Like I've ran so many calls in my 14 years or whatnot, where I'm sitting here looking at a kid like this kid ain't gonna make it, and then I'm sitting here looking at a family member, and somebody's got to tell that family member that this child right here, or this man, or this woman that you love, is not gonna make it. So another significant call that kind of stuck with me was doing CPR on a 2-week-old baby. That one stuck with me too, because we were by ourselves. Me and my other friend, who we've been working together for a while. We were by ourselves for a little bit until the rescue 10 in Charlotte showed up. But just remembering picking up, doing CPR on a baby, it's just like, it's saying this is not normal. That's something that doesn't normally happen, and it resonated with me. What's another one? There's a few more calls that I ran that kind of, not necessarily bad calls, mostly domestic violence calls that bothered me, because it's like, I don't like the way that is going down, because all of a sudden this dude, or woman, there's some women out there that beat men. I mean, this is how it is, but it's mainly the men, or a man puts his hands on a woman, and then she denies it, and it's like, why? Why are you putting yourself through that? Or any other type of call that involves any call that involves children bothered me a little bit. Um, there was one call right before me and my family went to Disney World. I was driving Battalion 8, which is the airport battalion. I was driving the battalion chief, and we ran a wreck, and it was a drunk driver in an Escalade, and he had two 3-year-olds in the third row seat in the back, not seatbelt, an 8-year-old, an 11-year-old, and then a 14-year-old in the front seat. And he was drunk. And one of the cars, they either T-boned a car that was running from a drive-by shooting. So the car shot into a house, and then they were racing down the road, and the Escalade T-boned them, and it almost flipped the Escalade over. So it T-boned them, threw this car out of the way, the Escalade almost flipped over. And the little girl told me a story, told me what she did in that moment, the 11-year-old girl. She said, as we were flipping, one of her little sister cousins was going out of the window. She grabbed them and was holding the other one, pulled them back in, and then they all hit the floor. I was like,
Oh my God.
God, that's terrible for her to think if I let her go, she dies. If we go out of this window, we all die. And I mean, they were just so traumatized. But that was like one of the things I realized. I was like, this job takes a toll on you. The things we see bother us so bad sometimes, and a lot of people don't address it. A lot of people are told not to address it. Hey, don't worry about that. Suck it up. And I'm just like, nah, man, I'm not sucking this shit up. I can't do that. So yeah, those are the few calls that really stand out to me that have molded the way I operate in the fire service. We've had a few fire calls. One of my first fires, a guy tried to set the house on fire, so he started at the back of the house pouring gas, or he started at the front of the house pouring gas to the back of the house, and then lit it off in the back of the house, and it overran him, and he didn't get out in time. So that was my first fire ever, and I remember going in, and we were moving hose, and I stopped, and I was sitting on. I thought it was closed, so I stopped in the corner, and I'm sitting, and I'm pulling hose, and I was like, all right, I gotta go. And as soon as I move, I hear the rescue say, we got a victim, and I look back and I see legs get drug out, and I was like, oh, that was a person. I didn't know it at the time, but I was sitting on the guy that started the fire, moving hose, getting ready to go fight fire, and I come out and I was kind of bothered by it because I was like, man, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to save that dude, but he wasn't. He was already long gone by the time we got there. But it was in the back of my head that he was right there, and I didn't even notice it. But I was also a brand new firefighter. It was literally my first ever structure fire going inside or whatnot. And that's about it. There's probably a few more I could probably come across later on, but those are the major ones that really shaped my mental health story as to why I wanted to do mental health.
So what were the tools that you started using to improve your own mental health?
So the first time with the kid in the pond, I realized that actually talking about it is the first step. Once you admit that there's a problem, that's the first step to getting the ball rolling. So I started that, and I went to therapy with a Patty Lyerly in Salisbury. So Lyerly Funeral Home, there was a fire when I was in recruit school in Concord. Salisbury had a Lyerly Funeral Home. It was a big funeral home fire. And I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm kind of mad because I'm not there. I'm in recruit school. I was like, man, I want to be at that fire. And one of the training captains in Concord was like, don't worry about that. You'll go to more fires. I was like, but that's a big fire. I want to go. And it was funny when I got back to Salisbury after recruit school, I put my gear on, can't go in the fire, can't do anything. I'm still in recruit school, but I'm just standing there, and the deputy chief comes up to me. He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I don't know, waiting to do something." And he was like, "Okay." He said, "You want a job?" I was like, "Part-time or full-time?" I don't know why I asked part-time or full-time. I was like, I should just be like, "Yes, I want a job." He said, "Full-time." I said, "Absolutely." So that's how that got started. But Patty Lyerly was a therapist, and I went to her, and she kind of started giving me like the tapping therapy and stuff like that. So I did that for a little bit, and then I was just like, I don't know. I think I felt like I got better, but I probably just stopped too early, or just got to a point where I was like, I'll be fine. I'll get over it. So I get more resources. I got more resources when I got to Charlotte. When I got to Charlotte and we started going through things, and I started actually reaching out to the EAP and talking to them and getting some actual therapeutic help, like actually sitting down and talking to a therapist, that's when my help started to get better. That's when my mental health started getting better, because there was one time my wife looked at me after it was a busy night and I was very tired. I was just ill. My wife looked at me and she said, "You need to get some help." And I was like, "Yeah, I need to get some help. I need to go get some help. I need to go figure something out." And the next day I had called and set up some appointments to go get therapy, because if you don't get therapy, there's no point in saying, "Hey, I got a problem." You have to go do something to help it, you know? Um, that's probably the most I did, was going to therapy and talking with somebody.
Brilliant. And what about deciding then to join peer support, CISM, all those things?
So decided to do that bit kind of after the whole roundtable thing we did in Salisbury, and then I noticed that helped. That kick started me on the, hey, I need to go get something figured out, because I just had a breakdown in front of all these people. I said, okay, when I got to Charlotte and I saw that we had a peer support team, I said, I want to be on it. I want to go get all the training for peer support, get all the training for CISM, and be on those teams and actually be used when people have pretty bad calls, because I feel like I'm good at taking in what somebody tells me, because I hear all the time, like when somebody starts talking about their story and then they start telling me what they're going through or what they went through or what they saw and how it bothered them. I'm like, okay, so I'm good at hearing that stuff, but I need to be better at giving them some ways to go, giving them some things that can help them outside of drinking alcohol, because that seems to be the first thing that happens. Like, man, I can't sleep. I'm gonna go get drunk and pass out. It's like, no, don't do that. Like, walk, drink some water, you know, functional mushrooms, do something, do something that's gonna help you wind down, because I get it. When you try to lay down and all you can picture is a kid in a red coat being pulled out of a lake, it's tough. You know what I mean? Or just in general, you just can't calm down because the last call you ran bothered you too much. So that's what drove me to get into CISM, is to be able to, and peer support is, I've ran a few peer support, I guess you could say, calls where we show up to the departments that have had bad calls and we talk to them. Being able to come in and tell the initial things that I went through and say, hey, I went through these things and I'm standing in front of you. When you start seeing these things and going through these things, you have to reach out and get help. Do not bottle it up. Do not say, suck it up, you'll be all right. Go get help, because it doesn't help. It's not going to benefit you to continue to man up and push through it if you don't have anything to push through with. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
that was one of the, actually being able to have the tools to give somebody direction was why I did that.
What about work week? Do you guys have Kelly days?
Yes, we do. So we have Kelly Day, Kelly Night, and we just got done picking vacation. So a lot of guys and girls pick vacation off of their Kellys. So we get a Kelly Day and a Kelly Night. So we work half shifts. Um, in Salisbury, we had 24-hour Kellys, and I was like, that's not bad. But here in Charlotte, we have a day Kelly and a night Kelly, and I mean, it's not bad, but it's just you got to know with Charlotte's traffic, it's going to be hectic sometimes getting in on a night Kelly or getting home from a day Kelly. Or, yeah, getting home from a day Kelly and coming in off of a night Kelly or whatnot.
So if you've got Kelly days and you overstaff in a positive way where you have extra bodies on the rig, you're actually set up pretty well for a 24/72 then.
See, 24. We did a schedule study. We have a schedule group talking about different schedules now. So the way Charlotte's schedule is, it's a modified 24/48. So we're on a shift, off 24, on 24, off 48. And then that's the first part of the tour. Then you come back after 2 days, on a day, off a day, on a day, and then you get a 96. So you get a 4-day break. And that first sequence is a tour, and then a 4-day break, then the next tour. So a lot of people had cut back, especially rookies that are coming out of recruit school with not many vacation hours. They can cut back on using their vacation because you have a 4-day break every couple weeks. You get a 4-day break. So I would think a 24/72 shift would be good, but a lot of people say that there's not enough funding for it or there's not enough manpower for it because we can't fill trucks now. And I was like, I see that, but the benefits of the 3 days off, that first 24 off, that's your wind down. That's where you get in the house, you wind down, and you decompress from the 24-hour shift you just ran. Then you have a 24-hour shift just for yourself. You can do whatever. You don't have to worry because you're not going to work the next day. And then the next day you're gearing up, getting ready for the next 24.
Exactly.
So those 3 days right there are very, very critical to a 24-hour shift. Now, 24/48, horrendous. That's a horrendous schedule because you only have 1 day to recuperate and 1 day to gear back up. And then you're back at it again. So I would not want to do a 24/48 again. That's what we had at Salisbury. And there's a few other variations of on a day, off a day, on a day, off a day, on a day, off 96. And those were okay, but the 24/72 schedule is it's like you said, it has the most benefits of all the schedules I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Do you have vacancies? Are you filling with overtime at the moment, either volunteered or mandatory?
We're having a lot of vacancies just because that's just the way vacation falls around this time period. So around hunting season, the holidays, and over the summer. That's when, and honestly, it starts in the summer. So in the summer, you start seeing more higher backs, more overtime shifts. Then when it starts to hit hunting season, you're going to see a bunch of overtime shifts. And then the holidays, it's going to be a lot of overtime, getting close to the point where we have the mandatory higher back. So the way our mandatory policy is every Kelly has a week. So if I'm a number 8, then when I'm on Kelly, that whole week I'm on mandatory. So at any point they can call me leaving shift or at home and say, hey, you're on Mando, you need to come back in and you got to report to duty. So that's the best way they could come up with to enact, or I guess you could say enforce mandatories, is to say, well, it's your Kelly week, so you're definitely going to be off, so we can definitely have you come in and work higher back. You know what I mean? Or work overtime.
See, this is what's interesting is when people say there isn't the money, well, the money is all the overtime that's unneeded, then also the lack of retention, people that leave their department after they train them and they go somewhere else. And then when you look at Kelly's, it's a staffing nightmare too, because when someone who's supposed to be in that seat isn't, now either you offer them time and a half to be in that seat, or you gotta force someone else to come in. So if you've already got Kelly days and you've got extra bodies on the truck, you would probably only need, I'm just guessing now, a third of a shift to create an entire D shift. And I guarantee you that money is probably in the retention and overtime budget alone. So it's really interesting, when people kind of moving these, I always call it the Rubik's Cube. They're moving the colors around rather than looking at the cube saying, well, how can we make the cube smaller? but now you've got a fourth platoon. You got another entire shift that
Mm,
you can lean on, and now you don't have to worry about Kellys. There are no Kellys. You're not staffing. You're not moving people around. So it sounds
yeah.
like you guys are actually in a great position to do that. So I hope they will look seriously at the 24/72, because you've got all the pieces now. And instead of being murdered for a tour to get
Yeah.
to that 4 days off, you just do a 24 and you've got 3 days off every
Hmm.
single time.
Yeah. And I think one of the things they said about until we hire enough people for that is called debit days based off of your Kelly. Okay, your Kelly, or you can put in days that you want to work hire back. So you would work and then you'd be on hire back to fill that Delta shift until we hire enough people
Yep.
to cover it. And I was like, I could see that. It's just going to take time, and far as getting the information and education together to see if we can provide a fourth shift. Because I see the benefits of being able to sleep on that third. But the thing is too, our part time jobs are not taken into consideration when they say, okay, you're going to be off for 3 days. Like some people go from Charlotte to a part time job, or from their full time fire job to a part time fire job, and those days aren't taken into consideration in your recovery. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very valid point, because I get a lot of people, usually chiefs, saying, well, if we give them more time off, they'll just work more. And I always say, well, firstly, that's a very arrogant statement that you're in charge of people on their days off, but I'll bite. If you have a healthy shift, so you've done your part as an employer to create a 42-hour work week for your people, there is nothing wrong with saying, but there will be, a stipulation that you absolutely can work on your days off. No one's saying you can't, but you can't work overnight. So you can't take, like you said, a 12-hour overnight shift at a fire department or an ER or a private ambulance company, because, yeah, we do need you to be rested and recover to come back in. But
Mm,
you either work for someone else, or you're an entrepreneur and you have your own business, hanging drywall, landscaping, personal training, swim coach, whatever your thing is, and you go home at night and you have dinner with your family and you sleep in your own bed. There is nothing wrong with that if you need some extra money. And I think it's good.
yeah.
You have a second identity, a second tribe, a second income. God forbid you get fired or hurt. So
Mm,
I think there's a middle ground where, yeah, there's a responsibility for the individual to rest when they're on the days off. But that doesn't mean you cannot work. It's just which type of jobs are okay. And then there's a few, very, very small amount. You'd be like, all right, well, this is going to require you not to sleep all night. That's not, not allowed if you're going to be in that. And I don't think anyone would have an issue with that at all, because if you're
mm,
not working more shifts at a fire department because you're fully staffed now and overtime is few and far between, then now it inspires people like, what else do I love doing? All right, I'm going to go
mm,
start doing cabinetry because I've always loved woodwork, and I'm going to start a side job there. Beautiful. I think that's a
mm.
great idea.
And yeah, it has its perks as far as having that time off, especially when it comes to vacation. Because the other schedule that was up was the 4896, or yeah, 4896,
Yeah.
and I was like, there's no way, I'm
No,
not
it's
doing that one.
insane. Absolute insanity.
I don't want that one.
Yeah.
Because 2 days, especially I was at 15, and I mean it was like 2 days of getting beat down, and like everybody's like, oh, you sleep in that second day. There's been so many times I'd get woke up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and I'll say, oh, my shift starts at 8, but I'm running, or I'd come in early and run a 7 o'clock call for the shift that's for the person I'm relieving. And it's like, no, you won't get to sleep in.
Mm-hmm.
You won't get to sleep in. That second day won't be like a Sunday if you got to get training knocked out. You have to get hose testing knocked out. You got to test hydrants. It's not going to be a sit around the station day. You're going to work,
Yeah.
because that's what we do. We're going to run calls. We're going to work. So it's hard to do 2 days straight. I mean, and the thing is, too, some people are like, well, I do 2 days when I do my normal shift and a hire back. So what's wrong with doing 2 days on my normal shift and then having 4 days off? And I was like, because you're doing a hire back. You're working and you're like, I'm here filling in. I'm going to put up the same work, but it's just got a different context to it. You know what I mean?
It really
That
boils down to
that
just the science as well. Like, it is nothing short of dangerous to be awake 2 days straight. And yes, we might not always be awake, but
mhm,
disrupted sleep. Like, you are waiting to be woken up. And again, I always
Yes.
advocate for the people in the busy stations, the mid-sized stations, you know what I mean? The ones that are running. Yes, there are some anomalies, the sleepy stations where they run one call a shift, but you know what? Usually, like we said, they're the veterans that have done 20, 25 years already.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at any sleep medicine whatsoever, it is completely undisputed that it is irresponsible. Like we're pushing it on a 24-hour shift. When you start going beyond that, now you're just unprofessional, unethical, and dangerous, acutely and
Mm-hmm.
chronically. So that's the argument against the 48, is that no one in the world, and even studies, I mean, coming back to your research, if you try to create a study that mimicked a firefighter's month, so you do in a busy department in 2025 where you've got understaffing and mandatory overtime, so you need these participants to be awake 24 hours every third day, and then you got to mimic the overtime, and then also a 48 or 72 if you want to mimic like the West Coast schedule, at least
Mm-hmm.
twice a month as well. No study ethics committee would approve that because they'd say this is dangerous, this is unethical, we won't let you do it. And that's how we work our firefighters. And I always
Mm-hmm.
tell
Yeah.
people there's three reasons we deliberately use sleep deprivation: special forces selection, which is just for a few days, interrogation, and torture. That's it. So when
That's
people,
what we do to
but
ourselves.
what about the 4 days? It's like, well, hold on. I thought you were actually wanting to help other people. Well, you're a liability 36 hours in when you're driving lights and sirens with all, everyone's family in these roads, and you're doing pediatric drug calculations in your head. So for
Mm-hmm.
safety and for efficacy and professionalism, I think the 24 is exactly where it should be. And if you have a 24/72 and you need to do overtime, like you said, it's hunting season, it's Christmas, that's when you can do a 24 off and then a 24 on to fill that overtime that day. Once in a while, at least you got a night's sleep in between the two of them. But the 48,
Mm-hmm.
72s, 96s are, I mean, just, they're just, they should never even be allowed.
It's tough. It's tough because when you sit back and you think about 48 hours straight on a busy engine company, engine 15 would run. We would shoot for a quota of 15 calls a shift, so that's 30 calls in 48 hours. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the most I've ran was 26 calls in 24 hours at 15, and I was like, man, I'm about to die. I got home, and this was over the summer. I had got home, and I was talking to my wife about something, and I laid on the floor face down, and I passed out. And one of my older kids comes in, and he looks at me, he's like, "Is he asleep?" And she's like, "Yeah." He's like, "How does he sleep like that?" I was so tired,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, "That's crazy." But like when you talk about sleep deprivation or even just sleep disruptions, what's the science say about one disruption in sleep is equivalent to what a blood alcohol content of a drunk person?
Yep. Yeah. If 24 hours without sleep is the same as having a blood alcohol of 0.1. And what's interesting is if you think about going back to, your study, that study is probably done at a college. They probably had college students volunteer to be, the recipients. It's a single night's sleep. And I think actually it's not even no sleep. I think it was just a reduced amount of sleep, to be honest, if you look at the studies. But regardless, so you've got kids that are probably sleeping every single night, aside from maybe some, like you said, some drinking at college in the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Now you put that into a 20-year veteran in the fire service. That 24, they've done that 24, what is it? I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times
Yeah,
by that. So is it 0.1 still? No, I think it's probably way past that. And that's
it
without
can be.
a 48. Now we're in another place. You see what I'm saying? So if
Yeah.
you and I would be cuffed if we had a blew a 0.9 or 0.09, excuse me, and yet we're
Yeah.
driving engines and trucks around with a, 0.12 or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insanity when you put it that way, but you're absolutely right. Cognitively, we are so depleted after that 24 hours without sleep. So, you do 24, I like the idea of even doing the later start time. So you get to sleep a little bit before you drive home.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you come through the door, you made it safely. And then you're also not so destroyed that you can actually sit down and play with your kids rather than face plant on the carpet and fall asleep.
Yeah. Because there's sometimes when you like, and every firefighter that I've asked when they leave after a busy shift, and it says, that time when you're driving, and then you're at exit 20, You're just driving on autopilot, and all of a sudden you look over, it's exit 30. You're like, what happened?
Yeah.
I lost 10 miles of driving or whatever, and it's just like that's the dangerous part. Next thing you know, your muscle memory or your just by habit, you're like, oh, that's my exit, and you look up and you know I've been driving. It's like your body knows it's been driving long enough that your exit is coming. Your exit is coming. So you take your exit. Next thing you know, you're home, and you're like, how did I get home? You know, and that's the hard part about being busy, because being busy is how you become a better firefighter. That's how you learn. Being busy.
Yeah.
Get on a busy engine company, get on a busy ladder company, running fires, running calls. As a captain, you're doing reports, you're actually getting through calls as a captain, and then that's how you learn how to be better. But then it takes so much of a toll on you every time, because like you said, sleep deprivation. And I want to say that doctor said something about sleep deprivation and cancer T cells. Like if you don't get enough sleep, REM sleep, your body can't produce the right cells to combat cancer cells. And I was like, okay, I can't remember. I got to go back and look and see what doctor it was.
Yeah, it's
But
probably Kirk Parsley. Because, yeah, I mean, if you look at sleep deprivation, everything that we suffer from, it is part of it amplifies the issue. So the low testosterone that we see in the fire service, sleep deprivation, addiction, suicide, depression, anxiety, sleep deprivation is a massive, because you heal, the brain takes a bath literally when you sleep. So we're seeing all these things and we're not sleeping. It's building up. Cancer, like you said, shift work is a known carcinogen. The WHO, World Health Organization, has it classified. I think it's 2A, if I got that right. So, obesity, I mean, strokes, all these things that you see killing us, that is one of the big risk factors of it. So why would we not address the thing that we know is contributing to all of these, on top of, fitness standards and, making sure everyone's fit and healthy, so that we bring down some of the heart disease and some of the other areas too. But yeah, sleep is a superpower. And now I've had so many people from the sports world say, look, if you're not sleeping properly, then your strength training or your nutrition almost means nothing. Like sleep is the very first pillar of health that we need to address.
And that's one of the things that, like I said, when I did my CBD research, everything fell by the wayside except for sleep, because sleep was the root cause of everything. So the more I looked into sleep, I recently picked up one that said sleep apnea is a complete, how you say, catalyst of PTSD, because your nervous system, when you have sleep apnea, because I have sleep apnea, I have a machine, your nervous system is always being activated when you have sleep apnea, because you're not breathing, so your body thinks you're dying and it startles you to wake. The same thing happens when we get calls. Our nervous system gets startled, or we're already in high alert. And if you're trying to sleep, which means you're going up and down all shift, running calls, running fires, nothing for hours. Then you go to a pediatric call, you go to a grandma, nothing for hours. Now you're trying to sleep. You get a call in the middle of the night. You kind of come back and lay down and go to sleep, and you can't. And a lot of people reached out to me about CBD for sleep. And I was like, okay, there's got to be something there. If a lot of people are like, I don't sleep good. I can only sleep good when I'm at the station. I can't sleep good at home. And I'm like, that's rough. Matty Roberts said it in Waves and War. He said when he was deployed, he said, this is the only time I've gotten a good night's sleep, was being deployed. And I was like, that's crazy, because some people say that about the station. I can only sleep good when I'm here at the fire station. I can't sleep good at home. Your family goes to sleep and you're just walking around trying to figure out something to do at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, when you should be sleeping. But at the station, you're like, I need to go to sleep because I know we're going to run calls tonight. So that's where with the psychedelics and sleep studies and stuff like that, that's the two things I'm focusing on, is psychedelics for the PTSD side of it, and then sleep as far as like the maintenance side of it, because like you said, nothing matters if you don't sleep good.
Well, I've also said this, when we talk about, we die 5 years after retirement, or, 12 years younger than the average, average American, those numbers should be even more scary, because if you look at who toes the line on a drill ground, I would argue we're some of the most, physically and mentally fit members of society. That's why we, made the cut. So then fast forward, the number of dorms I can think of now in fire stations that look like the bar in Star Wars. There were so many CPAPs everywhere. The
Yeah.
question is why? These should be very fit 40, 50-year-olds still. Why are we
Hmm.
seeing, apnea? But again, what is the common denominator? Whether you run in a station that sees fire all the time, or like my last place, mainly EMS, but you're getting up 3, 4, 5 times a
Hmm.
night, there's your correlation. Most
Yeah.
people should not be relying on a CPAP really at all, but certainly in their
Yeah.
40s and 50s when they're tactical athletes. But that is something that we see throughout the whole fire service. So there's a red flag for
Yeah.
you.
Because we'll see it, people will wake up and they'll have the CPAP lines from their mask. And I'm just like, gosh. And I started looking into it. It's just like our shift work getting disrupted, our nervous system, just like trauma, our nervous system gets into a habit. It gets into a pig path of waking up all the time. So that's what creates the sleep apnea, is you're trying to sleep so hard that you're startling yourself awake, like you're getting ready to run a call. But
Yeah. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. I know we're close to 2 hours now, so I want to throw some quick closing questions at you before I let you go.
okay.
First one I love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
So I listened to is it Travis Housey? Travis House,
Mm-hmm.
the Charleston Nine. I listened to his Make Your Own Light book. Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights book. For some reason, I listened to the whole thing and I was just like, Matthew McConaughey is pretty cool. Like he's a pretty cool dude. Like the things he's got going on. But and then let me look at. I want to say it's called Imagine Heaven. It's a book about near-death experiences, and I want to preface that. So when I was watching in Waves and War, I had done some research on near-death experiences also, and the way they explain their experience on DMT and ibogaine, it sounded so much similar to a near-death experience. Let me see. Let me double check and make sure that's the right book. I want to say it's called Imagine Heaven by John Burke, and he did a bunch of research on near-death experiences, and he interviewed kids, older guys, older women, people that were incarcerated that had near-death experience. He did so many interviews on near-death experiences, and he wrote a book about it. And I was like, the way Marcus and DJ Shipley said, they would go through a door, go through a drawer, pick a picture, and it would go to that point in life. Near-death experiences have the same thing in your life review. They die, you have a life review, and Jesus asks you, what have you done with the life I've given you? And you answer, then he shows you your life. And I was like, oh, wow. And I mean, it was the correlation between all of his experience interviews was the same. So Imagine Heaven is a good one. And then Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. It's his autobiography, just snippets. And Travis Howe's book, Make Your Own Light. And your book.
Well, thank
Your
you.
book's really, I've been listening to it. Like I said, I listened to it nonstop. It was pretty good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What about films, television, documentaries? Any of those that you love?
So I'm really big in sci-fi. So anything science fiction, I'm Star Wars. Stranger Things is probably my favorite show of all time. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is. And but Lucas said something in there that kind of resonated with me, that there's no coincidences in life anymore. And I was like, when he said it, I was thinking about what happened with us and the whole DJ Shipley thing, and I was like, that's not a coincidence. Like that happened for a reason.
I agree.
But in Waves and War, definitely one of the ones that I've really gravitated to, and I'm really big on military movies. I watched Warfare; it resonated with me. Lone Survivor, 13 Hours, and it's not necessarily the what happened to them. It's just like I feel. Oh, and Only the Brave. I watched that the other day, and I was just like, this movie. I watched it by myself because I was like, I don't want nobody to see me cry watching this movie.
It is. It's
But
powerful.
it's a powerful movie. Just the stories, just the grit behind what those guys push through. You know what I mean? I put the mental health connotation on it. Like when you're battling your demons in your head, it's the same thing as battling a jihadi or battling the Taliban. You know, just, it's in your head, and that's what I saw with Matty in Waves of War. It was like he was like, I'm still battling, but there's nobody to battle but myself. And that's what I seen with all three of them. It was like, we're still battling something, but there's nobody across, there's nobody on the other side of that sand that I need to be shooting. It's I need to focus on myself. I'm battling myself. And that's how I feel when I watch those movies. It's just like they're battling something and they're persevering through it. It just gives you that sense of get through it. Um, I like science fiction movies because I just like to think about what the future would be like. Like what's coming? What could we be doing? Could we be regrowing limbs, or downloading your consciousness to a computer? Just something, just crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's exciting though. I think the whole stem cell world is I think I just
Oh
saw
yeah,
that they actually, I think it was somewhere in Europe maybe, the ability to actually regrow teeth. So maybe you and
regrow
I, when we
teeth.
get older, we won't have to have those god awful dentures, but we'll just have nice
Yeah.
young fresh white teeth again. I'll be the
Oh my
envy of my
gosh,
countrymen.
I've seen a bunch of stuff. I try to cut my Instagram from scrolling, but sometimes I get caught scrolling, and you see so much stuff, and you're just like, is that true? Is that true? I like a good conspiracy theory. I'll sit back and dig into those, and just because like just to see what people are talking about or what people are thinking.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Well, next question. Is there a person you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
So the person I'm thinking about, they're out of Colorado, Jacqueline and Sean Toomey. They are the ones when I started my sleep. They told me about sleep recovery for the first responder. And Jacqueline actually comes to your department, and what she does is she teaches you a meditation for when you lay down and go to sleep. It's only 30 minutes, but it feels like you've just laid down for an hour nap, 2 hour nap, because you've meditated and relaxed your body and relaxed your mind. I reached out to them multiple times to talk about sleep and first responders. And when I started my CBD studies, I reached out to them because one of the guys at Charlotte told me about it. He said, "Hey, you need to look into them. They're on Facebook, and it's called Sleep Recovery for the First Responder." Jacqueline and Sean Toomey out of Colorado, and they really have a good idea on how sleep affects us as firefighters and first responders.
I forget which episode it was, but I had them on years ago, and I think it was during COVID, if I'm not mistaken. We
Okay.
did maybe even like a Facebook Live or something where she even did an actual meditation during the conversation. I can't remember exactly now, but I know that we did something
Yeah.
like that. So, but yeah, no, they're phenomenal. They really are.
Yeah.
Um,
Those are the two.
Brilliant. All right. Well, the last question before we make sure where everyone knows where to find you. What do you do to decompress?
Most of the time, I kind of just, when my kids and family go to sleep, I just kind of just sit down. I like to game. So I'll sit and game a little bit, play a few games, and just kind of, that's my biggest decompression is just sitting down and gaming. But every now and then I will sit down and do like a quick Bible study or read a quick part of the Bible and just try to interpret that part. Right now I'm in John, the book of John or the Gospel of John, chapter 1. That's where I'm at now, and I'm just slowly walking myself through that chapter of John, and then I'll go to the next chapter, and that's something I like to do to decompress. Um, I like the functional mushrooms. Like, have you heard of Life Cycle tinctures?
I haven't heard of them. I had oh my god, Umbo. I had the guys from Umbo on the show, and I use mud water morning and night too, which is also the same kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna look into mud water, and I just hadn't got a chance to get to it. But Life Cycle is the same type of thing. Lion's mane, reishi at nighttime to kind of calm down, and like tea, just to kind of just take my mind off of like everything that went on in the day. And journaling, like I might type on my computer, I might type a little passage on my computer or write something down that throughout the day kind of just had me either hemmed up or I seen myself focusing on my awareness of being aware of my anger or emotions and controlling them. I write that down like, hey, I got upset at this point. at one of my children, and I ended up fixing the situation without getting angry, or fixing the situation without losing my crap and walking out. And I like to do that at nighttime.
Brilliant. Well, for people listening then, if they want to reach out to you, where are the best places to find you online?
So you can find me. I got my email is DASHIPP, DASHIPP 100 at and on Facebook, Facebook's the same thing, DJ Shipp, but except it's D period J period. Because if you type DJ Shipp in, it won't pull me up. You have to put the periods in there, and you can find me there.
Brilliant. Well, DJ, like I said, there was this kind of universal coincidence that brought us together again. But, it's been such an interesting perspective. I mean, every single person that comes on the show, they have their own story. But we talked about CBD a long time ago. Now you're talking about In Waves and War and psychedelics. And I think this is the beautiful, metamorphosis of the fire service. I think we're becoming more and more progressive. And whether it's the work week, whether it's psychedelic, therapy, there are so many exciting innovations that we're starting to lean into, and your perspective from North Carolina has been invaluable. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for having me.